Welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor. Hi guys, and welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. Brian is out today and he's going to regret it because I have three powerhouses here, but he is enjoying a vacation with his wife. I have amazing news. If you haven't seen on social media already, several years worth of work has culminated thanks to the help of these three people here today. We have published an amazing article, and I want you all to read it. It'll be in the show notes, discussing exactly what is a lean mass hyperresponder, how do we predict it, and what can we do about it. And please go check this study out. I think it's going to be very important that anybody practicing keto, any doctor prescribing keto, should probably read this. It'll help them understand kind of the changes in lipids and potentially what to do about it, and realizing that it's an early study, but nonetheless very interesting. Today with me, I have Dr. Nick Norwitz. You know him on a prior episode. Amazing scientist. We have Dr. Adrian Soto Mota, who you may not know, but you should follow him on Twitter, @_Soto Mota. And he is a PhD in human metabolism, and particularly ketone metabolism. He's also an MD and a practicing internist. And he has written several articles and papers that I really encourage everybody to go take a look at and read, which you'll hear about later today. And we have honorary Dr. Dave Feldman, who I consider probably more brilliant than most cardiologists I've met. And when it comes to understanding lipids and being able to predict the phenomenon seen in people who are low carb. So guys, thank you for everybody coming on, and I'm excited about this paper that we've all worked on. Thank you, everybody. Dave, so start us. How do we get here? Maybe you should start us. How do we get here?
Well, of course, I'm going to have to give the short version because it's quite literally years of culmination. As you know, it started for me when both myself and my sister and my dad all started ketogenic diet way back in 2015. They didn't see a rise in the cholesterol. I did. I became obsessed in trying to figure out why, and then started doing a series of self-experiments and writing about it on a blog. A lot of attention started rising.
You collected a ton of data regarding this, right? Yeah. So how did you get to collecting data on, people with, how did that happen?
Well, I mean, in effect, it was just a matter of, my experiments started gaining more and more interest because I found I could manipulate my numbers quite a bit. I'm sure you've seen the inversion pattern, and maybe I'll supply the graphic for you guys to throw up a little bit later, but it shows this inverse pattern between the amount of fat I'm eating and my resulting total and LDL cholesterol. And those were the early stages before I had a better sense of the reasons why. But it was the early stages of what I would now refer to as the lipid energy model, which I'm happy to say both Nick and Adrian are working with me on now and really adding enormous aspects to it. Well, this model helps to try to explain why there's not just this increase in total and LDL cholesterol, but helps, I hope, to explain why we see it virtually in all of these other lipid metrics, including what we also see in a standard lipid panel, which also includes HDL cholesterol, the so-called good cholesterol, and triglyceride levels. And as I'm reporting this, I'm doing these experiments and I'm saying, hey, look at these differences. There are a lot of other people that through social media, thankfully, we're collaborating that data in. And then probably the next major milestone coming into 2016 is when I talked my sister, my wonderful sister, into doing this experiment with me, because even though her total and LDL levels were a lot lower, when we were doing it at the same time, eating exactly the same food, we saw the same patterns. Even though mine was much higher in magnitude, hers was lower, you could still see them kind of move together, and their correlation was extremely tight. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, this definitely is going to be applying to a lot of other people.
When did you start the survey? Because you're like, at some point, you're like, all right, I need to collect as much data as I can. When did you, and you know what? It's interesting because the first time we saw your Facebook group and potentially this survey mentioned in the literature was in a hit piece that you couldn't even respond to in a lipid journal. But like, when did you start saying, okay, let me collect this data? Let me collect other people's data and see if we can make sense of this. You had a vision that something was missing, and you said, let me find the data. When did that happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a sense, what you're talking about is several iterations of things. So the first real data is coming in through the comments in the website, through cholesterolcode.com. Really, around the same time I started the first version of this survey, the one we're not using in the paper, that was actually a more rudimentary one. I also was starting the Facebook group, the Lean Mass Hyperresponder Facebook group. We would later start the Cholesterol Code Facebook group. Both of those now have 7,000, 8,000 members, something in that neighborhood. And the most recent survey that we're making use of for this paper, I think I started that around 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check the timing on that. Something a little less than that. But as that data was rolling in, I kept, again, pinging all the people who are usually outside the low carb community, as I've been doing through this whole research journey, where I've been saying, hey, look at this, look at the patterns. And honestly, there just really weren't a lot of people that were interested until, you and I were talking about it, because you were looking to do this case series. And I said, I have this survey data. It could kind of set the stage, if you will, for what you're seeing with this case series, because I think there's a lot of data that we can make use of here.
We haven't said what the results were. People don't know what we're talking about yet.
Well, they're sitting on the edge of the seat, I'm sure. I'm sure they're sitting on the edge of their seat. So, okay. So you know what, Nick? So I'll give a brief, like, what happens next. So Dave collected all this data, and I'm in my clinic here. I was initially a little bit of a Dave skeptic, but then I came to see the light and looked more into the literature, and basically everything that he said would be true was true. And then in my patients, I had a couple of patients, like 5 patients come to me, and maybe more than that, maybe 10 patients now total, with crazy high, cholesterol levels. They came to me with it. They're like, help me what to do. I don't want to leave this diet that I'm on, and I don't know how to make sense of this. And all we did was we saw that a little bit of carbohydrate reintroduction was all it took to normalize their levels. And we did that in a supervised way. I mean, we ruled out, FH, we did calcium scores, we did, carotid ultrasounds. I mean, we did it in the safest possible way. And they all said, I'm not taking a statin, and help me figure this out. I mean, that's basically what these patients told me. Not all of them. Some of them added back carbs without, were willing to take a medication, but all of them said, if there's a way to handle this, I would. So we gathered that data, and I think the one that really amazed me and I brought to Dave's attention was like this 500 drop in LDL. And I'm like, well, wait a second. And then I'm trying to get it up and started. And then, you and I are both getting tired and weary. You have other projects. I have a practice. And I turned to Nick for help. And I'm like basically groveling. I'm like, please, smart PhD guy, help me. And so Nick, what happens next?
I get excited I'm so excited I can't even talk right now. I get excited like I've never been before, that this is happening, and to be involved with at this time you, Tro, and you, Dave, and then David Ludwig, who's our senior author, and to kind of start looking at these data and seeing what this could become. I couldn't help myself but just be like a complete nag, poking everybody all the time, because like, this needs to get out now. And it still feels like it's been a long road, but I'm extremely impatient. So the dropping of this.
Can I say something? Nick was like working with my I told my clinic staff, I was like, whatever Nick wants, Nick gets. I mean, we signed the HIPAA release, we signed the confidentiality agreement, we did that. And basically, boom, 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 boom. I mean, like, he made this happen. He really made this happen. They were like, who is this Nick guy? You know, I'm like, you'll meet him soon. Don't worry.
Well, it was only stage one because I didn't realize what this could become until we brought in Adrian, and like the level of like what this paper became after we brought Adrian in. I mean, you can read it for yourself, but like the relationships that he was able to demonstrate, and after he gets a chance to speak, we'll actually talk about them. You see one of the graphs behind me, like it is completely consistent with everything Dave's been saying for 6 years, but now it's dropping. And I like to call this paper the first domino because, yeah, like Dave and Tro both said, it's preliminary data, but you can't ignore this. And we can go over the devil's advocates' arguments that, you know, limitations of the study because it's preliminary, but I think these data are incredibly robust. And now there's no ignoring lean mass hyperresponders. This is putting it on the map. And what's to come is then the mechanistic and the risk. But like, this is observation. Like, these people are real, which has been something that Dave's been shouting forever. A lot of us who are of the phenotype have been shouting, and you go to conventionalists and they're like, no, this doesn't exist. I absolutely exist. Now here's some data to show it.
Can you talk about that?
Adrian, I'll let you have a word.
Hold on, before we go to Adrian, I watched a recent interview with David and a very prominent cardiologist, and that cardiologist was like, I don't know what this is. And in my mind, I'm like, holy crap, we're about to drop the ball. We're about to drop a bomb on him. You know, not like anything with him specifically, you know, but all of cardiology. He represents all of cardiology, in my opinion, and they don't know what this is. And you're right, this is a big deal. So Adrian, you know, we reached out to Nick. He was so happy to, you know, he was kind of like wind in our sails. What do you think when you come in on this project? Like, you're looking at this, what's your statistician hat say to you?
I have to say that I started as well as a Dave Feldman skeptic. It's nothing. I mean, he knows this. I mean, it's not something against Dave.
I love it. I honestly love that story.
Everybody did. He's just picking up like
I mean,
disciples.
It's just like
along the way.
I start over as a skeptic to everyone and everything and every new idea, and I am no ashamed in admitting. There's no shame in admitting that no one has made me buy more white bread in the world than Dave Feldman, because I had to see it for myself. You know, the first time I heard that, I mean, I knew Dave or about Dave way before he knew about me, and the first time I heard the white paper and the inversion pattern, and I had to test it on myself. I had to see it, and then sure enough, I saw it happening in my own body with my own eyes, and I started thinking, oh, okay. I mean, this is cool. This is something. This is an interesting new idea, and I started as a skeptic, and my statistician hat. It's actually a weird one, and I kind of inherited it from my father. My father is a mathematician, and I always say that I am perhaps the only person who disappointed their parents by getting into med school, because my mother, she's a philosopher, and my father is a mathematician. And when I came with them and, hey, I got into med school, they were like, oh, okay, I guess. And they were like, not so happy. But my father super wanted me to become a mathematician. And perhaps he definitely taught me a lot when I was in med school about statistics. And that has always interested me in general. And I remember that the first time I heard Dave Feldman speak about the triad and the LMHR phenotype, my already biased way of thinking about phenomenon in general thought what he is saying with words, or what he is proposing with words, is a linear model for predicting someone is thin. And that's it. That's it. When he does this kind of party trick at conferences that show me a lipid panel and I'll tell you who does it belong, I thought to myself, he is actually just paraphrasing with words, a linear model for simply predicting who is thin. And when Nick kindly invited me into this project, I thought or remembered that thought again, and said to myself, "Hey, let's see working on. Let's see if you can actually predict who is thin based on their lipid panel." And one of the things I like about statistics is that because I tend to play devil's advocate against everything, first of all myself, is that you can see the same, or you should see the same patterns emerging from different methods and from different techniques and from different, and we get more confidence in our conclusions when we see different and independent things pointing out to the same idea. And when I learned that I could get my hands on the cholesterol super survey data, I was super excited. I am also kind of impatient. Those who know me know I spend a good couple of full nights coding, because I like R. That's how I like to work on statistics. And because I am particularly strict against the ideas I like, and I am a zealot of transparency, data transparency, and methods transparency in biomedical science, I thought to myself, I need to make these methods as round and solid as possible, that they would convince even me. Because sometimes in peer review, there is this joke Dave now knows about of reviewer number 2. And we all fear reviewer number 2. And we know reviewer number 2 is always a pain in the butt. And it's just jealous about they did not write your paper. And reviewer number 2 is your arch enemy every time you submit paper. So I tend to think, I don't want to convince reviewer number 2. I would like to think I am going to be even more strict and strict than reviewer number 2. So I want to be this as round as possible. And that's how I proposed to approach this particular analysis. And I think it was super nice to see precisely the same ideas that were proposed before emerging from data. That's what you, as a scientist, what you love seeing.
Can I say one thing, Adrian? Because the listeners will hear about what you're going to talk about, which is the algorithm versus the gestalt, right? And we literally proved that the gestalt was proven to be correct by the algorithm. Nick, I want you to break it and make it very easy. Everybody's probably on the edge of their seat. Like, what did this study show? What did they show? So tell us, what did we show?
It showed this.
Oh, I don't know if you can share your screen. I gotta.
Is it my background? Is my background? Oh, it's not working well. All right,
it's going to
well,
you
can kind of see it. All right, it's not showing well. Basically, like, it showed that there is an inverse relationship. Well, it showed many things, but one thing it showed, and it's kind of like the mic drop moment, there's an inverse relationship between BMI and LDL change on a low carb diet. So, like, the thinner people have larger LDL changes. You gain some weight. Well, it wasn't perspective, but like the larger people have lower LDL changes. More than that, and I can go back to the 3D bar graph that was behind me, but the lower triglyceride to HDL ratio, even before you start your low carb diet, also predicts it. So basically, the bottom line, the catchphrase is, it's the lean and metabolically healthy people who are at risk for increases in LDL. I'll say that again. It is the lean and metabolically healthy people who are at risk for increases in LDL. And the reason this is so mind-blowing and so important is because high LDL has been like the boogeyman of low-carb diets. And it's the thing that every physician or a lot of patients fear. And we don't understand, we're learning, what is the cause? What is the heterogeneity? What is the source of the heterogeneity? Why do some people have massive increases in LDL and others don't? And what this paper is showing, and we can talk about exactly how we showed it in a hypothesis naive manner, is that it's BMI, it's triglyceride to HDL ratio, it's the lean, healthy people who are having, I keep on saying this, but it's such an important point, the increases in LDL. Somebody want to take it from me before I say that a fourth time?
No, I want to highlight two things. And we're teasing, I think we actually are showing something more profound, that weight and metabolic health are two different things. And both of these affect LDL increases. That weight is independently associated with LDL, and metabolic health, which implies that these are not the same in and of themselves. So it's a very
well, they
very
correlate, but they're
beautiful theme here.
synergistic. They add.
Yes, exactly, or dyssynergistic, or however we want to talk about it. You know.
You can
So
talk
can
about
I-
Spider-Man.
So can I add to this real quick? Because the one author who's not joining us, of course, is our senior author, David Ludwig. And for sure, if not that I could presume to speak for him, but he would definitely emphasize something important about this paper, particularly if you're not comfortable with your LDL going higher, which, by the way, is going to be 99% of physicians. It is definitely going to be the conventional opinion in medicine. And I should emphasize, all of us here on this panel, including David Ludwig, by no means, even if we're excited about this paper, are we wanting to be suggestive that the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype is safe. We do not know. And that's why we're doing this prospective study with the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype, which we're doing out of Citizen Science Foundation. But the big takeaway that I think really does, I mean, if we're really getting down to layman's terms, it's that for those people who are typically more obese and more likely metabolically unhealthy, this paper provides strong suggestive evidence that you're just not likely to see this huge increase in LDL. So if you're already starting in that place, which most people, at least lately, who are approaching keto typically are, then this is what they can probably assume that, generally speaking, that's not what's going to show up for them. Conversely, if you are leaner, guess what? This paper also suggests, because there's also the case series, which we'll get into in a moment, and what Tro was teasing, for which there is something that actually doesn't need to take you entirely off of low carb. It may take you out of keto, but it's periodizing in greater carbohydrates, which we will be getting to when we explore this in the lean mat and in the lipid energy model paper. So again, if you're uncomfortable with higher LDL, and it's absolutely understandable that you could be, again, this is where conventional medicine lies, this has something for both groups. And in that way, I think this is a paper that I can understand why it would be very popular in that respect.
Yeah, I just want to build on that, Dave, and emphasize that my excitement isn't, oh, we proved LDL isn't harmful. That's not it at all. This is just observational. But I'm so excited because it's, conventionalists would assume, a very paradoxical finding. It's a fascinating scientific observation. And I said this before when we were recording the other thing, it's the first domino. Like, now that this is out there, it can't be ignored. So then we're going to be able to start to hypothesize about the lipid energy model, put down a model that is really testable, and will set the stage for future experiments. And then you have the lean mass hyperresponder study. So this is just teasing it. It is the first domino, and I'm excited as a scientist to get answers. And like you said, this paper has something for everybody, because we show how you can reverse the phenotype, or at least partially reverse the phenotype, while maintaining low carb. And it's, suggests that people who, the largest population of people who are going to be using this, people with obesity, type 2 diabetes, they're probably not at risk at all, which is, again, good news for everybody. This should be an awesome paper for everybody. I hope everybody gets excited about it.
With one tiny footnote. The one tiny footnote, as you guys know, and part of a major motivation on my part for wanting to get this LMHR study done, is that while we've talked about those two groups, there's kind of a small fractional group, those folks who are generally metabolically healthy, but for which a ketogenic diet is of special importance, such as epilepsy, such as some cases of severe diabetes, particularly type 1, and so on and so forth. And those people, Nick, as I'm sure you would know, who have severe ulcerative colitis, again, we're trying. We're looking to try to get that data on risk as fast as we can. But this paper probably would be relevant to, at least over 95% of those people approaching low carb out there.
Can I actually, let me say
No, it's okay,
one last thing, and then it's you, Adrian. I want to actually, I'll divulge, I'm one of those people for whom keto is therapeutic. And you can see I'm very excited. Again, not because this is saying that I'm protected, but because even for those epileptics, even, for the people who you're talking about, Dave, if I were them listening to this right now, I would think, oh, wow, like answers are coming. I got to hang on a little longer, but people are actually interested in this, in my patienthood. And I actually will have answers to my big questions and my fear about LDL, probably, in most cases, soon enough. And that's one of the things that really excites me about it with respect to risk is I would love an answer. I know we don't have an answer, but I think it needs to be pursued. And it's been very frustrating that conventionals won't pursue it or haven't. And now, questions are going to be followed by answers, followed by questions. I'm just excited. All right.
That's something I would like to emphasize, that this study is important for many different reasons. And in science, there are stages to different ideas. And this study is simply showing that the observation of metabolically healthy and lean people tends to have large LDL changes is a consistent one. This is actually a thing. It's for future studies to, first of all, explain why this happens, for future studies to also document if these large LDL changes increase or not your cardiovascular risk, are entirely separate questions. Of course, they are related, but they are answered by different studies with different designs, and they shouldn't be mixed up. This should be clear. However, what's paramount about this particular study is that it convincingly documents that we can identify with confidence these hyper responders. And this is essential precisely for designing those future studies, which should answer what this means for cardiovascular risk and why this happens. Because you cannot start at any scientific study or clinical study without knowing how to recruit patients. And we actually show how those patients look like in order to design those studies to then explain why this is going on and then explain what it means for cardiovascular risk. So it is one of the first stepping stone, and what brings hope into what Nick was mentioning. Answers are coming for many different reasons. And regardless of, this is something I've mentioned already, but certainly not here, but regardless of where you stand on the LDL debate, regardless of what's your hypothesis or your opinion on the causality of LDL for cardiovascular disease, this is an important study because this shows those answers are coming. Because now we can identify who will have large LDL changes, isolated from the other lipid markers that are associated. And those studies are coming. Perhaps the most important one, it's already on the way, the LMHR study, which is precisely addressing what everyone wants to know. What does this do to cardiovascular risk? Like for those who want to be pragmatical, and for those who want to be scientific, and to understand why this is a biological fact or phenomenon or observation, a valid observation, if you want to downplay it to that level, answers are coming, and those studies will benefit from confidently identifying those patients who will have large LDL changes.
Can I ask you, Adrian, because we've been talking about the data, Adrian, Dave, intro, any of you, I'm going to duck down. I actually want I want you to walk through the bar graph behind me. I think it's so beautiful. And we've been talking about the data, but let's show some of it. So while I disappear,
well, I'll tell you, some people are listening in, most people are listening in. So we gotta talk about it in words.
Can we just say though, that there's an interesting history behind that, because for all the graphs that we have in the paper, you should know that Adrian was like a graph factory, and he would constantly turn over graphs. Unfortunately, many that we couldn't include because we could only have so many. That
the supplement's the best part. It's my favorite part.
Right, but this bar graph, it actually originally started as a heat map. Adrian was doing heat maps, and I was like, I don't think people fully get just how hot It really is. And I one day decided to just like throw together an Excel 3D bar graph, which I liked. And then Nick got a hold of it and made what you're seeing now. So this central graph, I love because all three of us had like different parts to play in it, and now we just love it because it's so effectively illustrates it. And Adrian, why don't you tell us why?
Sure. Well, what's going on here is that you have on your y-axis, or the height of the bars, how large was LDL change after a low-carb diet.
And change, that's the key thing. How much it had changed from where it started.
Not the absolute value of LDL, but how different it was from its baseline. And on the two complementary axes, X and Z, there is body mass index in a quartile range and the triglyceride to HDL ratio before the diet. And it's important, I want to emphasize before, because I mean, it's like if you try to predict if you will arrive late to work when you already know you left late your home. I mean, it's obvious, you know, you want to use the prior data. You want to use the prior data in order for it to be useful. It's useless to have something that you already know to predict something that you already know. So this is prior triglycerides to HDL-C and body mass index. And what you see, it's a monotonic gradient in both complementary axes, in the axis of BMI and the axis of triglyceride to HDL ratio, in which if you have, and I'll go to the lowest bar, the lowest LDL change bar. If you started a low carb diet having a BMI between 26 and 44, and your triglyceride to HDL-C ratio was between 2.3 and 12, so it was definitely abnormal, your LDL changed only 40 milligrams per deciliter. Whereas if you are in the opposite side of the chart and you started being super lean with a BMI between 14 and 21 and a triglyceride to HDL-C ratio of 0.18 to 0.76, your change was 4 times that, was 134, almost 4 times that. So this is something that already tells you that there are vastly different behaviors to LDL change depending on where you started. And to don't overcomplicate things, it's particularly reassuring that this is linear. I mean, one of the strongest arguments for BMI being an important player in this phenomenon is how linear these changes are. And I also want to emphasize something that's actually hidden in this particular graph, because if you go to this small bar of only 40 milligrams per deciliter change in LDL, a good amount of those people, of the people who fall in that particular square or bar, actually had negative changes of LDL, because this is the median. So in some people, in some cases, those who started being overweight or obese and with a high triglycerides to HDL ratio, LDL actually went down, not up. Whereas in the other part of the chart, there was no one who started a low-carb diet being thin and with a low triglyceride to HDL ratio where this happened. Everyone's LDL went up.
I want to pause there just because my favorite p-value in the paper, we have a lot of cool p-values. They're like 10 to the negative 16th. But my favorite one, and people listening know what lean mass hyperresponders were, but the lean people who have the biggest changes, right? You know, they have very different profiles on the low carb diet. I think mean LDL was like 316, but their pre-diet LDL, the lean mass hyperresponders and the not, the median was exactly the same. You can't make that up. It was 135. It was perfectly the same. So it's just funny to think about all these numbers. And yeah, I think to Adrian's point, it's like, while it says 26 0.1 to 44.4, not only is that include people, 27 to be precise, who had drops, but also it's not like an equal distribution 26 to 44, because 44 is morbidly obese. Most of the people are at 26 because this is quartile. So it's not like a distribution where you have people with BMIs of like 30, 35. We had very few people. Like out of the 597, maybe like a handful, less than 10, with really high BMIs above even like 32. So it's consistent with the prior literature, which actually shows in obesity, in true obesity, LDL tends not to go up. And our senior author, David Ludwig, actually had a recent paper on that, showing not only does LDL not go up, lipoprotein insulin resistance improves, LPA improves, LPAA. So our study, the sample was overall very lean, and yet we had still enough heterogeneity to generate this baby.
And this is particularly important to the insight that we were mentioning a few minutes before of, I mean, there are many different reasons to go or to adopt a low-carb diet. For the majority of people who are being prescribed or who want to follow a low-carb diet, do so precisely because they want to control their weight or they want to control their blood sugar. And they tend to be overweight and they tend to have high triglyceride to HDL ratios. So the vast majority of people adopting low-carb diets should expect little to negative LDL changes. So this is not perhaps intuitive from this particular graph because every bar has the same amount of people. But in the real world, most people are adopting a low-carb diet, starting precisely at that low bar you see on the bottom right. If you go back to the slide or to the, because this is
which one do you want? I'll pull up anyone.
No, the tree. You were already inciting.
I know.
Because I think this is also, I mean, to go back to my point of, we want to see the same. No, it's not the whole thing. It's okay. It's okay.
That's all right. People are mostly going to be listening.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that you don't, as a researcher, particularly in this analysis, you don't get to choose where the 25th and the 75th, for example, percentile drops. What are the values? And one of the methods we use is called a regression tree, where you basically tell the computer, choose yourself the cutoff points and choose yourself the different predictors to predict who will have large LDL changes. And please just remember, be aware that computers couldn't care less and are ignorant of standard WHO cutoff points for BMI. I mean, we've been using the WHO cutoff points for BMI for decades now. And it was particularly nice to see that the very first predictor and the very first cutoff point a computer chooses when trying to predict who will have large LDL changes is a BMI of 25.
Can you see that on the screen, or is it literally just cut off at the top?
No, it's cut off.
No, it's just cut off.
Okay. And Tro's point is well taken. A lot of people are going to be listening to this. Let me try to distill it down a little bit, what you just said, Adrian, because this obviously was a very meaningful moment to me. I'm wandering around telling everybody about this phenotype, the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype. It's product of my pattern recognition, I think, but I don't really know for sure. It just seemed, I don't know, because we all are subject to confirmation bias. I may just be running into more people, or for that matter, people who fit the phenotype I'm describing may be finding me. And therefore, there could be a huge number of other people. This, by the way, is just a problem with science in general, is the more that I may be injecting my biases into my analysis, the more problematic it is. And so I, of course, was aware of the approach that Adrian was talking about on the technology side of the sector, which is to say, frankly, let the machine tell us what the results are and try to remove as much of our imputation as possible, our injecting our bias, and let the results speak for themselves, right? And when Adrian was
that's exactly why we like computers running these kind of tests, because they are immune to the biases we humans inevitably will bring to the analysis strategy.
Right. And so in another podcast, which we did recently, you were talking about the value of scoring. in that respect. And I think that that's a good use of scores. I though also think that there's a bad use of scores, which is very hypothesis driven, but we won't go into that just yet. The main thing is it was very meaningful to me in the course of developing this paper that Adrian was like, okay, now let's see, we'll set aside your LMHR phenotype. Let's see what the machine says. Let's see if it hypothesis naively with this data, particularly the lipid data, against known BMI and against known existing diet. Let's see what it tells us about this outcome. And,
in other words, we made the computer also Dave Feldman skeptic.
Yes,
so
right.
That's exactly the idea we wanted to transmit, to make the computer being Dave Feldman skeptic and see if it arrives to the same conclusions that using.
And no offense to all of you guys, but I think the computer is a much better skeptic than anybody else that's out there, right?
Guys, can I give one last thing? And I want to begin to wrap this up because, and being mindful of time, but there's one thing I want to say to come back to clinical, the clinical utility of this, right? Nick talked about David Ludwig's paper, which showed that high, medium, low carb diets were compared, and there was no difference in LDL as you lowered your carbohydrates to 20%, right? And that same paper showed that lipoprotein A decreases and the insulin resistance score decreases, right? So if you look at the sum of data, it means the average person with obesity, who's overweight or obese, who does a low carb diet will likely have an improvement in their overall lipid score, including LDL. Right, potentially including LDL, and the ones that are more likely to have a negative outcome are leaner and more I say negative in the conventional paradigm that we look at LDL, okay? And here's the best part. Not only have we isolated those people and determined who's most likely to, quote unquote, according to conventional lipidology, experience harm, but here's also the solution, right? Hey, just add back a little bit of carbohydrates.
Let me emphasize that, because let's assume the conventional paradigm about LDL is true. Then it's okay. The very nice thing about Tro's clinical case series is that you actually now have the solution. Just add in regularly some carbohydrates and your LDL will stay down. So even if this in the end ends up confirming that LDL by itself is super bad for your coronary walls, you already have what you should do as a clinician, or what you should advise in order to stay with the best of the both worlds, the best of the low carb diet, while keeping your LDL in check, assuming you should do so, or you should pursue that in your patients. So I think that's a very round observation about this particular phenomenon. Not only we can now know how large LDL changes look like as a person, but we also know what to do in case this ends up being bad for your cardiovascular risk. And that's why it's so nice to have a complementary case series documenting exactly that. It's progress in the terms of learning how to prescribe low carb diets.
Well, look, let's just add in this one other thing, because it should be mentioned. It may well be, and we're not making this claim because it's retrospective, but it may well be that this can therefore be predictive. In other words, right now, when somebody comes to me and they're lean and they're going, I am thinking about going on keto, but I don't know if my cholesterol will go up. I currently, right now, I say, look, all I can say is, given existing data, if you really are concerned about your LDL, I would predict that's exactly what you'll see, because you're lean, because that's the data that I see up until this point in time. They say, well, I'm very concerned about LDL. I suggest, with all the caveats that it's not medical advice, et cetera, maybe they should try low carb and not keto, because then they can just skip the step of having actually seen the LDL go up, if that's indeed what they're going to end up seeing. So the potential of it being very predictive could be super useful for those people who really are concerned about their LDL going very high, but for which there may be some at least early data that can be very suggestive about what they can do to help mitigate that.
Nick, I'm going to let you close out this topic, and then we'll, get. So, what's the final words? Give us the final words, Nick. You're on mute, though.
First thing I want to say is, for those who can stick around, I want to just plug. I want to record a little video with whoever can about devil's advocate, because we kind of anticipate what the pushback against this paper is going to be, and I just want to record a video about that. But that aside, the takeaway is this. Lean mass hyper-responders exist. They are real. Lean mass hyper-responders exist. They are real. That is the point.
Sure.
It's so good, but that statement is so cool. It's so scientifically speaking, and I know I'm enthusiastic. I can't help it. It's not about the risk. It's not we're going to get to the mechanism. Well, it teases the mechanism. This is such a mind-blowing observation that needs to be interrogated, and it's been under everybody's nose, and now there's a paper about it.
Do you know why it's under everybody's nose? Because 90% of America is overfed for the last 70 years. That's why it's under everybody's nose. And that's why
that meta would show that LDL doesn't typically increase, is because guess what? The meta is your average American going on a low carb diet, right? That's why.
Okay.
That's the thing. Well, I want to emphasize, like, lean mass hyperresponders are a unique population, but in being this unique population, they're a fascinating natural experiment from which we can learn so much. They isolate the high LDL variable. I'm preaching to the choir, as I can tell. Dave is nodding. It's like, these aren't people with known genetic abnormalities like familial hypercholesterolemia. In fact, we tested for that, or Tro tested for that in the case series. None of them had any FH. And these aren't people who are metabolically unhealthy with high LDL. This is something that at least I think, and I think everybody here agrees with me, is mechanistic and reproducible. So it isolates the high LDL variable. It's, again, I can't get over how interesting this is and how excited about this paper I am. So that's my last word on it. And yeah.
Me too.
Cool.
Me too. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. And we're going to explore now in the second part of this a little bit more about each of you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Tro.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on, Tro. This has been a bit fun. Adrian and Nick and I have definitely been chatting a lot, and I know on social media we've mentioned that we've been collaborating a lot, and it's just been such a delight to be working with them. And I really have to emphasize, it was sort of said offline. You had said, Tro, that you're just amazed by how much work Nick and Adrian have put out. I can tell you from having a front row seat, I'm stunned. I'm absolutely blown away, because they are both, I said this recently, guys. I said, I kind of feel like Nick and Adrian are more like engineers, because we're so used to seeing a lot of output and not a lot of, I just have to say, I am absolutely, blown away by the amount of productivity that I've seen from both of you guys. And for anybody who's not already following Nick and Adrian, you've got to start like right now, because it's just really amazing. Not only the work they put out so far, but what I think is going to be coming ahead from everything you guys are doing.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing? Dave, you and we started talking about this, I want to say 2 years ago. Well, we're talking about what we're not supposed to talk about, but we have this paper upcoming, guys. It's going to be published soon. I'm not going to talk about it. And actually, when Nick came on and then Adrian, it was like wind in my sails. Would you agree? Because we had like we kind of started, we kind of got the building blocks together. We had a couple of meetings, and then it was like, it could have fallen apart if it wasn't for Nick, really. So I got to thank you, Nick. You
guys are giving me too much credit. Not Adrian. Adrian deserves the credit when you see what he's done. But the groundwork was done when I got there. I just this is so important. And I know we're talking vaguely, but people will know soon enough. I just it was an absolute pleasure to be able to be a part of this, and just kind of I can't not have the enthusiasm to push it forward, because it's just that important and cool. It's nothing else I want to be doing. I was joking with Adrian the other day, because I was like, we got our news and there were things that we wanted to do around this. And I'm sitting this is so important. And I'm here sitting in a lecture about fish tank granuloma disease. which is like interesting, but like I'm like, my mind just can't settle right now on fish tank granuloma disease. I need to like be working on what we're working on. So, you know, I'm really excited that's coming out, and you know, the legwork that went into it years before I was even aware of this space. You know, it comes from you guys, Tro and Dave. So I couldn't be more appreciative.
Yeah, I mean, let me just kind of set a boundary of sorts, which is just for anybody who's kind of confused. We have mentioned that we're all working together. We're working together on multiple projects. We were excited because we're finally kind of getting into a groove. And so we can't really talk a lot beyond that, other than to say with these multiple projects, a lot of things are just coming together. They're really gelling well. And yeah, like as you could probably pick up, I mean, certainly I feel like there really is a kind of, Tro put out the tweet earlier, Avengers Assemble. We all happen to be MCU fans, so we, you know, kind of take that to heart with some joy. It kind of has felt that way, right? Like it's just been the right number of people with the right skill sets that could really make this, you know, come together, that can make this work move forward. And so I'm just constantly overwhelmed with gratitude working with everyone who's on this this podcast right now. So it's been a lot of fun, and we hope to have some stuff for you in the coming future at some point. But we're right now getting to where things are like really rolling pretty quickly, and we love it.
Well, can we actually go into each person, kind of what they're working on individually? Because I'd love to, you know, and what they've accomplished kind of recently. Because I got to be honest, you know, Dave, you inspire me. Nick, you too. Adrian, all of you guys inspire me. And I know you guys have done a lot. And we were kind of kidding around before we hit the record button. But I've seen, I don't know, I want to say 3 papers from Adrian in the past like 2 months, one of which I think Nick was a co-author on. So what have you guys been working on, and what's in the pipeline? Can we go one by one?
Sure. Please don't get used to this amount of scientific production. Don't hold me to it for the next years.
Wait. Before Adrian speaks, I just have to put this out there because I'm going to kill myself if I don't, and we'll re-announce this. But he tries to downplay how hard he works. But I think we need to just like share the anecdote of the day that our upcoming project got submitted. So I want to tell the story because I find it still like blows my mind. So we were finishing up this paper, and there like was the crowning jewel that needed to be put on top, and we needed Adrian for that because he's like a biostatistician god. So like I'm running between classes. I call Adrian, like just cold call him. I was like, "Can you help me out, buddy? Like we need to do this thing." To which he replies, "Yeah," and then like sends me a Zoom link. And to which I'm late. Like he was waiting for me for 10 minutes, which is absurd. I get on, and he's in a full neck brace in like a hospital bed. He had just been hit by a bus or a truck?
Yeah, a truck.
He was in an Uber, and he got hit by a truck. And he's in the hospital. He's like, no, I just want to finish this up. Like I'm like just want to do the science. Totally unfazed. It still like kind of blows my mind. And I was joking with Dave about it. I keep joking with Dave about it. Like there's that, you know, aphorism people say like I feel like I got hit by a bus. And I used to say that, and right. You caught me today before. Like, I mean, I feel like I get hit by a bus. Like when I got the booster, I'm like, I feel like I can't say that anymore. Adrian ruined it for me. So if you want to know about his scientific work ethos, like there's an anecdote. And I have more from Oxford to embarrass him, but I'll sidebar that, and he can tell you about the science because I think the romance is going on too much.
Can you talk a little bit about, because you had one interesting paper, I think it's worth mentioning, about, you know, it was kind of comparing the clinical approach to medicine versus the scoring / guideline based approach to medicine. Because I read this paper and I was like, you know, you can't teach good clinical skills, you know, or you can supplement them. I mean, that's what I walked away thinking. Can you talk about this? Because I think we all know this in medicine a little bit, like a good clinician pays attention and takes notes and listens and puts things together. And certainly evidence-based medicine can supplement that. But, you know, when I read your paper, I thought to myself, it cannot replace it. So tell us about your paper.
I would say that's my second favorite paper of this year. This year has been a productive one. And if I have to pick, well, the first one is precisely the one we can't talk about, but the second one is this one. And it actually, yeah, I mean, it actually originated as the second part of an initial project in the early days of the pandemic. Because when I was finishing my PhD at Oxford, when the pandemic exploded everywhere, and I was in this position where I had to decide where exactly in the world I was going to write or to finish writing my PhD thesis. And I decided to go back to Mexico. But before my PhD, I specialized as an internist in internal medicine. And
like a regular old doc.
Like a regular doc, like
Yeah.
like an adult. And this is, people ask me all the time, what exactly is an internist? And the best answer I can come back with is, like, we are pediatricians for adults. And if you are below a certain age threshold, you go to the pediatrician. And if you are above a certain age threshold, you go to the geriatrician. And if you are in between, you come with us. So we are like adult experts, and we are nose prickers because we feel entitled to go and investigate every single system in human physiology. And I think that's what kind of resonates with, I like physiology in general. I like to understand how things work in our body. And anyway, I specialized.
Can I add to that, Adrian? Can I add to that,
Sure.
Adrian? That the internist is traditionally a little bit more academic than a GP,
Yeah.
you know, historically, not maybe.
Yeah, that's
not
why
today,
Adrian,
you know,
it just doesn't even make any sense in my brain. Like, I've not met any, no offense to doctors in general, love doctors. I do not normally meet a doctor like Adrian who has the level of knowledge and depth that you have with numbers and statistics that I couldn't. When Nick first told me, it's like, well, he's going to be working at the hospital today. I'm like, to do what? Like, what's he doing there? Is he like working is he working R in the back or something? Like, what? How? And so that's.
Anyway. I have a regular job. I like to think I have a regular and normal job. I like to think that my Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 job, sometimes a little bit later, is complementary to the scientific skills a researcher needs. And I am convinced that being involved in research makes better clinicians, and being involved in the clinics makes better researchers for biomedical sciences, of course. So I think they are complementary. And I was trained as an internist in perhaps, because that's another, perhaps not known to everybody. I live in Mexico City, and I was raised here. I went to med school here, and you could say that I was trained in internal medicine in like Mexico's most academic hospital. It's of course not hospitals in Mexico are like that, but it's a research center on its own. And you could say it's Mexico's NIH. And I was used to have consultants who at the same time were working as clinical researchers or basic science researchers who follow the path kind of similar to mine. But to go back to the original story of this paper, when I came back to Mexico, most internal medicine attendings are in the high risk tier for COVID, particularly in the early days of the pandemic. They are above 60 years old. They live with 1 or 2 comorbidities. So there was a huge load on COVID healthcare for residents, and there was a huge need for not so risky internal medicine consultants. So I was politely asked to step in also as a COVID clinician, as a COVID care clinician, and I had my good share of the front line in the early days of the pandemic. But because I like numbers, because I like prediction models, and because I like statistics, one of the things that I felt was needed in the early days of the pandemic, and at the same time, I mean, it's not like I was the only one who thought of this. There are a zillion scores, and that's exactly how this paper came to birth. I was thinking, okay, the typical
hold
way
on, Adrian, just so the average listener knows, what he's talking about is a score to see if we can determine who will have severe disease, who may not need aggressive treatment. For example, if you have atrial fibrillation and you have risk factors that promote, that increase your chance of having a stroke, we may use that type of score depending on your risk factors, to guide us whether we should give you a medication that thins the blood and has side effects. So we try to figure out who is the highest risk, more likely to benefit from medications, or more likely to, let's say, another score is a score is more likely to have a bleed when they're on a blood thinner. So we have lots of ways to kind of determine, you know, who's more likely to be at risk of a certain disease, and we can use these scores sometimes to guide clinical decision making. And they have pluses and minuses, and I'm sure you're going to talk about them.
Yeah, exactly. And these scores or medical calcs, as some people call them, are already part of, they are super embedded in current modern medical practice. And most guidelines, most clinical guidelines would propose and encourage to use these scores to take more or to make more objective clinical decisions, and to reduce a little bit of the subjectivity that inevitably exists between different doctors. So anyway, the typical way you would build scores is you would have a large data set of the different characteristics of patients with different outcomes, and then you would compare the statistical differences and similarities between different groups of that present the outcomes you are interested in. And there are a variety of statistical methods to build and validate those scores. In statistics, and something I actually lectured about this morning, there is a huge, there is a small revolution, or a huge change, if you want to paraphrase it differently, in the way we think about statistics. And classical statistics and the kind of statistics we practice for a century were based in null hypothesis testing, and are the typical hypothesis tests that people learn in colleges. And they are filled with weird ways of drawing conclusions from a data set. I don't like that approach. And as a statistician, I identify myself as a Bayesian statistician, because I think that the way Bayes' theorem allows you to draw conclusions is closer to the way humans think. And in Bayes, Thomas Bayes, who I mean, I won't start lecturing. I won't turn this podcast into a lecture, but one of my favorite ideas from Thomas Bayes is that he thought probabilities were opinions. The way he thought of understanding risk were simply, you have an opinion about something, you collect data, and you update your opinion. That's it. And this is the mental process 6-year-olds are capable of. And you have an idea, you simply go and collect some data, and either you reinforce that idea or confirm your hypothesis, or you refute them and start looking for something else. There are only a handful of predictive scores that work with this logic, that are based on, you have a predetermined assumption, you go and see if something happened, and then you update that probability. So the paper I thought of doing in the early days of the pandemic was to build a Bayesian score for COVID mortality. And at the same time I was working in the clinic, I was collecting data and collaborating with other friends in Mexico to get data to adapt a score from Chinese data to Mexico's setting. And that worked in a Bayesian manner. And it was a nice score. It was a paper that was published in the Journal of the American College of Emergency Physicians. And so far, so good. The problem is that, I mean, and Nick knows this better than anyone, my favorite role in science is devil's advocate, particularly against my own ideas. And I try to stay autocritical of my own ideas and my own hypothesis. And what bothered me was that by the time my paper was published, by the time that scores paper was published, there was already, I mean, the setting was entirely different, because we collected data in April and May. And at the end of May, early June, the recovery trials results were published. And
just so you guys know, the recovery trial showed that steroids were effective in or, depending on the severity of COVID, that steroids could potentially reduce mortality. So things changed.
And at the same time, it was patent to me that we were getting better at treating COVID patients. We were definitely learning. And I remember when I compared the early days of the pandemic and the things we had to face and the complications that were emerging in different patients and the amount of people that,
you remember the uncertainty?
Exactly.
Exactly. Uncertain, like, what am I doing? Why? How much? What should I do? Like, should I intervene? Should I not?
You had 10 questions for every different answer, and it was a disease that was new to everyone, and that idea is exactly what triggered this. That insight was what triggered the second paper, because I realized that not very frequently in medicine you find a disease that's new to everyone, regardless of their training level. Because when you are in a residency program or when you are in medical school, you already know that, okay, you are new to whatever, sepsis, heart failure, but your attending has seen much more of this disease and you can rely on their experience. So what I realized was that this was a unique opportunity in history in the way that everyone is new. Everyone's idea, the ideas from the first year resident are as good as mine, because we have seen the same amount of patients, like his intuition about what we should do has the same confidence than the one I have.
Well,
and it was
there's chinks to that armor, right? A little bit, right? Because you've seen ARDS, you've seen like acute respiratory issues, some of what does and doesn't work, so but yeah, okay,
sure.
I agree.
And actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because to complicate things even further, I think residency programs in the States start in July, perhaps that's wrong.
Yeah.
But in Mexico, we start in March, and it was the exact same month the pandemic exploded for us. So everyone was new at our residency program. We were treating an entirely new disease. And what happened in the later months was that after 4 or 5 months, residents were already small COVID experts. But they had no clue what to do with sodium. They had no clue what to do with potassium. They had no clue what to do with antibiotics. They had no clue. And that's the part where it steps in exactly what you are mentioning.
Can I tell people a little bit about the fright? So every doctor fears July, because the old set of experienced residents leaves, right, and the new set of interns comes in, and it is a terrifying time. I think there's been data to show that month, that transition month, has worse outcomes, certainly some worse outcomes than others. It's a terrifying time to be a teaching attending, I'll tell you that.
And to be a patient, I tend to advise patients that if you are going for an elective surgery, one of those surgeries that you can schedule and are not an emergency one, you'll do better having that surgery in October, November than in March, or the equivalent in the States would be in July or August. Anyway, the point is that this idea of everyone is new, but we are learning, because as we started using steroids and we started gaining more experience in suspecting early, pulmonary thromboembolism, or some of the other complications that now we know are hallmarks of severe COVID. I remembered that I noticed that we were doing so much better. So to go back to my autocritical exercise, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe the score I developed is already useless. Because the first thing you learn when you are, the first thing they teach you when you learn about how to build prediction scores is that all of them are context dependent, and that you are always told that you should never test your score in the same data or the same population you developed it, because it's obvious it will perform well. And if you change that setting, performance will drop. Anyway, the point is that I was thinking maybe the score I built is already useless. Maybe the scores everyone built are already useless, because now we have vaccines, now we have steroids, now we have perhaps the most fragile patients, sadly, already passed away. The typical patient that is hospitalized today of COVID-19 is different than the patient we had when I was collecting data. So the very simple idea and was, let's test everyone's gut feelings about, is this patient going to die of COVID or not, against the scores that were already validated. And in a very Bayesian way, we asked clinicians, what's your opinion about the probability this patient is going to die? And what's your prior, would be the technical term. And let's test who is more effective in the end. If every single score that was properly validated that we could have, that we could get our hands on for COVID, or your gut feelings about this one looks bad. Perhaps he is not, his labs don't look so bad yet, but this one is going to have a rough trip, versus I am confident. And that's what that paper is about. And
who won? Tell us. You have to tell us who won. Now it's either the clinical docs versus the calculator. Who won?
I mean, I have to. The politically right answer is there was a tie, but of course, gut feelings and clinical gestalt, I mean, in my opinion, have more advantages than the ones we are prepared to accept as scientific doctors. Because of course, if you're a scientific doctor, you're not comfortable with the idea of, perhaps you should listen to your subjective assessments and your gut feelings. You don't like, when you have a calculator, a clinical calculator, and you see numbers and there's a paper attached to it, you feel like you are doing evidence-based medicine and that you are behaving super scientifically and that you are so smart. Because it's hard to translate the subjective skills of your experience. And in summary, or the net results is that these gut feelings, the technical term is clinical gestalt, predict as well as any score that we found. And it was only when confidence about predictions was particularly low that some scores performed better than clinical gestalt. And I think this is useful because this reinforces the idea that all these evidence-based clinical calculators are just complementary, because you cannot teach in an app how to have clinical judgment. It's not a substitute for that. And in the end, just to finish, and one of the most important advantages I see for clinical gestalt versus these other scores is that it updates itself immediately. Because, for example, and this is particularly true for a pandemic setting, the hospital strain is not the same at all points in time. Because if you know better than anyone that if your ER is absolutely full in the morning, whoever arrives this night has less chances of surviving. And this changes every day, this changes every month. And your clinical assessment updates itself immediately and is resilient in contrast with other, it gains performance over time, whereas scores lose this performance over time. So that's my recap, and I'm glad you like that.
Can I segue a little bit, Adrian? I'm going to actually go to Dave, because I want to talk about that gestalt, because Dave, and I want to find out from Dave, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nick a little bit. But Dave, when we started first looking at this lean mass hyperresponder data, you saw patterns, you saw something, and you made observations. And I think right now, I think there's nobody better in the world that can predict who will get a higher LDL than maybe the 4 people in this room, you know?
Sure.
So, but you saw this phenomenon, just like he was literally doing what you're saying, Adrian. He was like, you know, seeing something play out, putting his, you know, gestalt together. And that's what made this paper possible. Dave literally sitting at the data and saying, you know, wait a second, you know, Dave, can you talk about, you know, one kind of when you first started to see this process repeat, what did you start thinking? And then what are you up to lately? Because, you know, That's what I'm interested to hear about that.
Yeah. So first things first, and Adrian was definitely touching on this, but I also think it's kind of, I don't want to make it sound as though, because obviously I'm biased as an engineer, I don't want to make it sound as though our culture within engineering is, necessarily more scientific or anything along those lines. But I will say it is part of our world. Absolutely, that the idea today gets torn down tomorrow very comfortably. I mean, as engineers, we're constantly one-upping each other. There's a lot of creative destruction in the world of technology. It's just, it's commonplace, it's standard. And so in that way, we can't afford to be very attached to our ideas, even if it's like a long-standing idea. In fact, the longer standing the idea, the more likely it is to be targeted to see if it can be pulled down. So I say that to kind of set the stage a little bit, in that when I saw my cholesterol go up as a result of going on a ketogenic diet, and then I was reading, reasons for having high cholesterol, and then reasons for, or ways by which to lower it. Naturally, the very first thing I was thinking was, well, gosh, maybe it's true. Maybe because I'm consuming a lot of saturated fat or a lot of dietary cholesterol, because I'm reading this in so many different places, that's really the reason for my higher level of total and LDL cholesterol. But it was kind of odd, because I was not seeing this with my dad and my sister, who likewise were consuming higher saturated fat, higher cholesterol, but they tended to not be as lean as I was. They weren't quite as fit as I was. And they also had some other underlying conditions, some other issues. So that was really kind of the beginning, was sort of thinking, well, this doesn't quite make sense. And then 2 weeks later, and I've told this story many times over, I'm, a lot more depressed as I'm waiting for the retest. And as I'm doing that, I'm just eating a lot less total. And of course, eating a lot less saturated fat and a lot less cholesterol, because I'm eating a lot less. I'm eating like close to a third of what I'm eating. And then I see instead my total and LDL cholesterol shoot through the roof. And for me, that was maybe the biggest light bulb moment that started this whole journey, because after that point, I was like, I really want to understand these patterns. And as you know, through 2016 and half of 2017, I'm experimenting on myself a lot. I'm just reporting it back to the community. But this is where I kind of had an advantage with social media, in that a lot of people started following my work and they were like, hey, yeah, I've also got this. I've also got this higher LDL cholesterol, and I don't get it, because a lot of my friends, my neighbors, my family, and so forth, they don't seem to be getting it. What's different about us? What's unusual? And so more and more, I was trying to piece together the parts, but getting back to that cultural difference, I really did want to see, what else popped out that was different besides the high LDL. And frankly, as much as I would like to, claim a higher level of sophistication, it was just tenacity at staying on top of it. And then spreadsheet. I mean, I know us engineers were on spreadsheets a lot, but I'm sorry, even you don't have to be at Adrian's caliber. It's great if you are, but you don't have to be at super high level of statistics to just start working through data once you get more and more of it. Pattern recognition is innate in humans. And yes, as an engineer, I test very high in abstract mechanics, so I am probably going to spot patterns sooner than many other people. But that said, it's how many times have you ran into other doctors who would also likewise go, and you know what, I also noticed that their HDL tends to be higher and their triglycerides tend to be lower. I don't know for sure though. But that's actually what started it. And more I started then reaching out to people to ask them if they would see a more pronounced increase if they happen to be leaner, if they happen to be fitter, if they happen to be lower carb, et cetera. And then eventually I wrote that article on lean mass hyperresponders in 2017. I just have to say also, to this day, I'm still laughing when I think back to it, because it was one of those cases where I was like, I'm just going to put this out here, but I wouldn't be surprised if a whole bunch of people come back to me and they're like, you're wrong. I'm morbidly obese and I have this profile. And they have like 5 other friends, and just happened to be that I missed those people from before that point. But no, it's actually, to this day, it's the most commented on article in cholesterolcode.com. And
when was that article,
was
Dave?
the beginning. It was July 2017 that I published.
Amazing. Yeah, that's absolutely amazing.
And the most common thing I would hear is, well, it's because of the amount of saturated fat. They really need to take down the saturated fat, and that'll have the largest effect in bringing down their LDL and total cholesterol. So, yeah, I found that to be a bit ironic because, again, I was very, very low saturated fat in those 2 weeks leading up to one of the highest total and LDL cholesterol tests I'd ever had.
Can I say something? I remember back then, maybe it was 2018, I was working on my first case series on binge eating. And I remember starting to look into the eating disorder data, right? I looked into anorexia, binge eating, I'm looking through it. And I remember at the time I was like, you told me, Tro, your cholesterol is going to go up. And my LDL at the time was like, I don't know, 90 or something like that. I'm like, no, it's never going to go up. My diet's perfect. And lo and behold, it certainly did. And, but at the same time, I'm like, no, I'm going to eat a lot of vegetables. I'm going to keep high protein, don't worry about it. I got this covered. It's going to go down, that LDL, and at the same time, I'm looking at this is 2018, the anorexia data, and it stares me right in the face. I'm like, oh crap, Dave's right. Like, oh crap, the Dave is right. And then at the time, the SGLT2 inhibitor drugs come out, which are the drugs that make you pee out glucose, and lo and behold, what do? They raise LDL. And I'm like, oh crap, he definitely got it right. The engineers won again. So, can we transition a little bit? I want to know what you're doing lately. What's going on lately for you? I know you have.
Well, as we just talked about a
approval.
little bit earlier, I'm doing a lot of collaborative projects, particularly with Nick and Adrian, and a little bit behind the scenes with you, which we'll get a chance to discuss at a later point once more of this is known. But I'm also working right now. I'm actually doing some technology work, which I've appreciated. It's been kind of a nice aside. While I love the research space, at the same time, I like the forward momentum that I feel like I get all the time in technology. But that said, I also have some experiments in the hopper, and one that I'm super excited about, as I'm sure Nick is tired of me talking about, is I'm doing a
text at like 1 a.m. like this morning. I'm excited about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
no. You know what, Dave? You take for granted that people may not know, and I certainly don't know. You have the trial, the trial you're working on, right?
of course. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so used to everyone knowing about that it's almost like they're tired of hearing it. But yes, obviously the single biggest thing, quite literally, the highest priority in my every single day, my every single minute, is the lean mass hyperresponder, the very phenotype we were just talking about, the clinical trial that we're doing. And so the quick elevator pitch is 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago last month, I had started a crowdfunding campaign to literally just fund for ourselves to do this trial because I couldn't get it done privately. There's many different lipidologists and cardiologists I talked to. I could never get them interested enough to make this happen. And so we raised the money. Thank you, low carb community, because you made it happen. And then ultimately we were able to get together around $200,000 to effectively get this rolling. And basically what it is we're recruiting 100 participants that are lean mass hyperresponders. We're getting a CT angiogram of whatever their day zero is from when they come to the center to get it tested. We're flying them out to UCLA. And then 1 year later for them, 365 days-ish later, they're going to be getting a second scan, which will be used for comparison. And the CT angiograms are extremely high resolution. So we'll actually be able to capture the plaque development, or to whatever degree the volume has changed, and we'll be able to look at it at population level. I'm already on the record for saying that I predict it's going to be low, but that said, I really don't know. That's why we're doing this. That's why we need prospective data to really find out for ourselves.
I'm kind of terrified for you. I got to be honest. We've talked about that. I'm terrified. And not only that, but you set up a not-for-profit to own your labs, right?
Well, there's a not-for-profit, which is the Citizen Science Foundation.
Right.
Own Your Labs is our blood work reseller service, which actually it's set up to incentivize people to submit their anonymized data, but they're technically two different entities. In fact, Citizen Science Foundation has no entanglement with any of our other endeavors, and it has a 0% admin overhead. So everybody who contributes to it, it goes straight to the study.
That's kind of awesome. Anything else that you can leak to us that you're working on?
No, I mean, I was going to mention the fiber experiment. The fiber experiment, I'm going to be in my obsessive way that I do in my experiments. I'm going to be using fiber as the one intervention. And I have a hypothesis that would probably be considered controversial, but I think actually soluble fiber may be a lot more glycemic in a ketogenic context than is assumed. I know we like to go by net carbs. This experiment may show that there may be a problem with trying to go by net carbs.
There definitely is. Quest Nutrition has published their data showing that soluble fibers, like about 1 in 5 people have glycemic excursions from soluble fibers. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. All right, we're going to switch over to Nick. Nick, I don't know if we're allowed to talk. Are you allowed to talk about the case report you're working on?
What case report?
The
What case
CTA?
No, I don't know what you're talking about, Tro.
No. Oh, we can't talk about that. Yeah,
We're not talking. I'm working on a project with you guys, and then some other things. I'm quite busy with school. There's not much else. No, I'm kidding. So
Can you tell us, Nick, about your ad hoc lecture? I think that's one of the coolest stories of your.
First, I'm promising to myself and everybody right now, I'm going to keep this brief because I want to get to people's Q&A, and then I know we want to do a little private recording after this for future purposes. First thing I want to say to kind of complete this interesting story arc, Dave, you were talking to me about it the other day, about how we all came to this, at least you, me, and Tro, from self-discovery in like completely independent manners. I had the same experience with you. Like, I did not know lean mass hyperresponders are a thing. My LDL was 90s. I went keto. I'm like, I'll never have a heart problem. And I wasn't, checking my lipids because there was no reason to. I was a young, healthy guy, or at least heart-wise. And, or at least atherosclerosis wise, I'm taking myself in. But my LDL, like I was eating high fiber, very Mediterranean, like 35 grams of fiber a day, like maybe 15% saturated fat. My LDL goes from like 90 to well above 300. And it's just like, what? What is this? And so I ended up researching it, writing about it a little bit. And then only later discovering this lean mass hyperresponder thing. And I'm like, that's exactly me. And that's exactly Dave. That's exactly Tro. And then so many other people. And I got really fascinated in this phenomenon that is just, I don't know how anybody can be aware of it and not just be fascinated by it. Like, independent of our hypotheses about risk. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just
traditional cardiologists who are like, I don't know what this is. I don't know. I don't know about this lean mass hyper responder thing.
No cardiologists say that, Tro.
Yeah.
But what I actually want to say about that is I realize people are probably exposed to a lot of politicization. I can't talk right now about LDL and lean mass hyperresponder phenotype on Twitter. Either people think it's the coolest thing, people think it's good, people think it's bad. What I'm finding, and I'm finding this very surprising since starting at Harvard Med, was I thought that would translate into medical school with my professors, etc. I'm actually finding that's not the case. Like, I go around talking to peers about this phenomenon, about the lipid energy model, the ideas behind it, to professors, and universally the response is, oh, wow, that's really cool. Like, that's really interesting. And they get it. I was on a walk with, I'm not going to name people for the sake of anonymity, but like on a walk yesterday with just a friend. We wanted to go on a walk. It was a beautiful day in Boston. And he was asking me about this paper. The concept. And I was just explaining it to him, like, no graphics, just gesticulating, explaining the lipid energy model, explaining the phenomenon. And he was like explaining it back to me in real time, really was getting it and was just super fascinated by it, which for me is really exciting to see my peers get interested in it, to see my professors even get interested in it and take me seriously when I talk about it. And even cardiologists around here, we're working on some projects. I've shown them some of the preliminary data, and they're like, oh, wow, like, this is really interesting. People are really humble about it and really interested about it when you can remove the obscuring forces of the tweetosphere and people who get, reputations. And I don't think yours is say well earned, Dave, but among certain people, you have a reputation. So anything you say is just can be interpreted in a certain light. And that is not at all fair, but that's the reality and why we see what we see on Twitter. But what I'm trying to say is this is just interesting and people are interested in it. And I think once the first domino falls, which might happen shortly, this is going to catch fire, and it deserves to because it's interesting. And then besides that, I've just really been, working on some projects with you guys, but otherwise enjoying medical school, really enjoying getting to know my peers and doing my part to interest people in metabolic health and to the credit of my community at HMS, like people are really, really interested in metabolic health once you bring up the topic. So
can you talk about that? Can you talk about, because Dave mentioned what happened. I know you probably don't want to share it, but
yeah, I'm gonna blush if I talk about it.
What's that?
I don't know how to talk about it without really being.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Maybe Dave should say it then.
Yeah. No, listen, this is, I love it because he's been networking. He's been bringing that information forward for quite a while. And, amongst other students that are all hungry for learning. And it's funny because Nick, for as accomplished as he is coming into Harvard Med, very humbly says this is still a crop of extremely intelligent, extremely smart people. And so it's not like he's just bringing this forward to a lot of people who know nothing at all. A lot of these same people can immediately recognize many of the different things he's taking them through relatively quickly, which is great. And so sure enough, at the end of one class where they happen to put a lot of focus on lipids, especially on lipid metabolism, with, in a separate part of the class, somebody who already has known a little bit of Nick's discussion on it says, can we have Nick also talk about this? Because not having Nick discuss this is kind of like going to Disneyland and not meeting Mickey Mouse, which is just fantastic. But then something really amazing happened. Nick said, if you guys aren't interested, since class is literally over, feel free to hang around. We'll just kind of talk about it. And I can just sort of, discuss my observations, lipid energy model, and so on and so forth. And Nick, how many people hung back?
A good group.
He's doing it.
I think that, the level of enthusiasm, I want to commend my peers because this was something like, quite honestly, and this is not me being humble, this is me being honest. Like before I got really sick and was forced to experiment out of desperation with the ketogenic diet, I thought nutrition was a fluffy science. Like it's very easy to follow the dogma. Like I know what health is. I know what nutrition is. Like eat your whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean meats. Like this is easy. Just follow the rules. And so the fact that my peers are open to me kind of pushing against that and receptive to my, what I consider logic, often counter to the status quo. Like it is a he said, she said, right? And it's me saying something versus...
No. It's a they said, he said.
Right? Basically, it's like...
Yeah, of course.
Right, they said, he said. Why? Like, I try to put myself in somebody else's shoes. Why would you listen to me? Like, why would you listen to me rather than the USDA? It doesn't make any sense. If it doesn't. But the fact that these students are interested enough to actually try to evaluate the ideas on their own merit and come to their own conclusions, I give them tremendous credit for that. That's so cool. And I think it makes me really optimistic for the future because I have an opinion about where the field is going. And the fact that, the other M1s here at HMS are kind of little sponges for the research that's going to be dropping out maybe this week and elsewhere, then that's not a spoiler.
Look, here's the thing.
Fair.
Here's the thing. All I can say is I just love I love how different you're saying the environment is relative to what we're so used to on social media. And social media may have made, certainly it's affected how much I've kind of felt jaded, that I just appreciate your stories, Nick, on how entirely different it is in a truly learning environment.
They've called us a murderer. They've called us a murderer. Literally, I've seen a tweet calling you a murderer. You know, you say that, right? You say it like humbly, like we've been jaded, but literally, one, other doctors have never seen what you've seen, right? They've never seen what I've seen. It's not in the literature, right? I mean, it's in the literature in weird esoteric places. And we've literally been called, murderers.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that make you? I mean, how does that? I mean, so Nick, you're describing a cordial environment, but it's not so cordial, everywhere.
Well, I actually want to, sorry to just jump in. I want to respond to that because I disagree that people haven't seen it. People that are really working clinically in this space, I would say they haven't registered it. In fact, funny story. I'm going to be talking with Dr. Gallant over in Israel, and I actually just shared our one paper with her, and she says, "This is so cool. I see this all the time, and you know what this is, and people will know what this is soon. It's cool to have a paper explaining it and documenting it." And yet, when I talk to conventionalists about it, most of the time it's like, "This doesn't exist. This can't be possible. This doesn't exist." And I'm like, "No, it very much does, and it's reproducible." That said, anyway, and then I kind of have to juxtapose those interactions with things I see in the hospital now, and I have to be kind of careful about what I say and don't say, just for professional reasons, and I can get in trouble. But I think this is fair to say. It's like I had one interaction where, I'm rounding around a particular hospital, and I see, someone. The whiteboard says their fasting blood sugar was 217, and they have a plate of half-eaten mashed potatoes and an empty case of chocolate cake out in front of them. And after the session, I kind of talked to my superior about it, and it doesn't even faze them. Like, oh yeah, it is. And I think that's like routine part of the course. People don't even really think about the metabolic health of patients. I think things are very algorithmic, and to think about things like Dave thinks about them, like an engineer, in a systematic way, it's like, okay, it's not just LDL, but how is this relating to HDL and the triglycerides and everything underneath it? How do these things talk with each other, and how can we tell a story about the network rather than just, okay, let's build an algorithm and just go to the cut points?
Can I talk about that for a second? Can I just say one thing, and then Adrian, I'll go to you. Nick, I have a patient who was sent to the premier lipidologist in New York City, probably the most well-known lipidologist in New York City. And we get on the phone. Patient's lost like 40 pounds. I advise the patient, as she loses weight, the cholesterol is going to go up. It happened, she wanted to get a second opinion about it. She went to the lipidologist. We get on the phone and we're talking about the lipid energy model. And I tell him, I'm sure you're aware of, hyperlipidemia and anorexia, for example. And he goes, yeah, it's my number one consult. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, I get like these thin, typically women who come in with a very high cholesterol. And so like, it's funny, we're chatting about it. I talk about our paper and he's like, oh, send it my way. He talks about that other paper that was published in 2019 on the case reports of hyperlipidemia that was not so favorable to Dave. But so we chatted about it and it was fine. And we came to a conclusion on what to do based on literally the data we all worked on, right? And it was fine. But then on social media, people call me a murderer.
You are quite a bulldog, Tro.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, Dave's not a bulldog.
No, Dave's a puppy dog.
Well, look, I'm going to do something crazy and literally empathize with where they're coming from their position, in the sense that I understand and acknowledge that if indeed the lipid hypothesis is as it is described, that then it doesn't matter whether the energy model is the reason. I could be right about the energy model, but wrong about my cautious optimism with regard to high LDL in the context of metabolic fat adaptation. But that's all the more reason why I've been as motivated as I've been, not just with the LMHR study, but in pursuing data comparable to the patterns of these lean mass hyperresponders, this triad.
Oh, somebody donated 20,000, right, to make that happen?
30.
Yes, that
30.
That literally happened this week. No, it's
I'm pitching in 500. If Ethan Weiss puts in 1,000, I'll throw in 500. Okay,
yeah, Ethan.
So let me
Ethan
know.
actually mentioned he might donate too. So to set up for anybody who doesn't already know, basically what happened is, and Tro, you know this because I don't know how long I've been talking about it. I've been saying, hey, we really should just get this data. I mean, we know the data is out there. We know longitudinal data is out there. Framingham, Copenhagen, UK Biobank, they all have longitudinal data. Let's just look. Let's look. We know atherogenic dyslipidemia, which is low HDL and high triglycerides, highly associates with cardiovascular disease, whatever your LDL is, right? So let's look at the reverse pattern of high HDL, low triglycerides alongside high LDL. In that way, we get a fairly strong sense that it's probably metabolically healthy individuals with high LDL, and then exclude, cholesterol lowering medication and other factors, and then just see if they not only have a higher rate of cardiovascular disease, at least above average, but also what their longevity is. Because as you know, I say it every 5 minutes, I love all cause mortality. And so I put that out as a tweet on Saturday night again. And I said, I'll just put out there. Does any researchers want to just do this? And Sunday morning, a donor reached out and they were like, you know what? Let's just solve this with a big check. How about I'll pitch $20,000 toward any researcher who wants to get longitudinal data to track this triad. And so I immediately put it out there. I put it out on social media, and now we're talking to some teams, and we may actually have 2 different teams, each with their own data sets that they're going to be examining this with, and we're going to make it happen. And granted, we have already limited data thus far. All the data that I've seen up until this point is, there's the Jeppesen study and the Framingham study that looks at cardiovascular disease in particular. I've also looked at NHANES in my very non-Adrian amateur-like way, where I was able to see what the association is once I was able to have comparable mean averages of age. It does tend to associate with longevity, even if you exclude younger ages. However, it could be reverse causation. That's fair. That's why I want to see longitudinal data overall. But look, let me just cut to the chase, because I get a bit animated about this. Virtually all the data that we have on high LDL and its association with cardiovascular disease comes from population data that has either genetic abnormalities in lipid metabolism or acquired diseases like, say, severe type 2 diabetes in lipid metabolism. It's all the more reason why we should specifically try to exclude that to see if we take those confounders out, since we know that they can impact total and LDL levels and ApoB characteristics, right? Like the small dents and so forth. Take all of that out and just look at metabolically healthy, normal populations with high LDL. It just seems like such a simple and easy question to query. So we should do it. We should look both backwards on the data, and we should look forward with this prospective trial with the LMHRs. That's all I'm asking. Let's just get the data to find out.
Let me try to wrap up everything from algorithms to Twitter hate to pattern recognition together, because what really resonated with me a few minutes ago was that the word algorithmic. And this is one of the things I dislike about scores, because most of the times when clinicians have scores, they stop thinking and they stop questioning what the guidelines are saying, because now there is already a score that has a scientific reference attached to it and has some numbers, and you feel evidence-based and smart about it. You stop thinking, you stop looking for different patterns, and you stop questioning what you are doing. And there are people who want to understand, and there are people who want to be proven right, and people who get animated and they sometimes get violent when someone proposes a different idea to what they practice, and they are in some ways tribal and dogmatic about their own views of the world, is people who don't want to understand. They just want to be proven right, and they kind of shut down these. They shut down their eyes for different pattern recognitions, and they shut down their views. And if there is something if there is a personality characteristic I have to pick as my favorite from Dave, is that he is honestly open about being proven wrong. And this is like the mantra, or should be the mantra of every single scientist, regardless if you are a professional scientist or not. I strongly believe humans are scientists by nature. We have questions, we enjoy understanding things, we enjoy manipulating different settings to prove different ideas. And this is something we do almost naturally. And however, when you bring these ideas into a setting where people gain reputation and where people gain money and where people gain status from their views about the world and medical practice, suddenly some people stop wanting to understand, and they simply just want to be right. And they close their scientific minds, and that's the context I see for Twitter hate. It's a bunch of people with algorithmic thinking who are calling out names and calling out loud people who don't follow the algorithm, instead of simply questioning, is my algorithm making sense? Would I do better listening to the neurons in my gut to try to understand this phenomenon? And this is also happens with statisticians, and a very, very popular meme in statistics blogs is that most of machine learning algorithms, or a good bunch of them, is focused on pattern recognition and classification of different images. And every time people become wary of Skynet taking over the world and machines ruling over the human race, I always remind them that even to this day, supercomputers struggle classifying correctly pictures from cats and dogs. And yes, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay the huge advancements that we have seen in the last decades for AI and for machine learning and for deep neural networks and Bayesian inference in rooted everything. But we sometimes forgot that we humans and the human brain is also a deep neural network with also Bayesian inference capable of learning. And even when I love supercomputers and I love data and everything there is to technology these days, if I have to bet who will learn faster, who will adapt better, if the machine learning versus the natural learning of an open brain, and that's the catch, because you can have your natural intelligence and your natural deep neural network, but close it when you adopt algorithmic thinking. I think that's algorithmic thinking in general is a cancer to medical practice and science in general. That's it.
I'd like to end there and say amen. I agree.
Hey everyone, we just wanted to let you know we have Doug Reynolds here from Low Carb USA. We want to talk about the Boca conference, is one that's impacted me, and that, as a matter of fact, that conference kind of changed my life and my career path to a degree. You know, hearing Rob Sivis and all the great people there kind of inspired me to make some life changes. So Tro, what do you say, man?
Oh, absolutely. These conferences are just so helpful. You know, Doug Reynolds, Pam Devine at Low Carb USA, to create this community. And now, you know, as this all kind of progresses and the low carb movement and metabolic health movements continue to grow, I think, you know, I'm remembering more and more the value these conferences had, especially after these past 2 years. And I'm definitely looking forward to coming back to Boca. When was it, Brian, we went last time? Was it 2 years ago?
2 years ago. I didn't have a hotel room. I had to crash on Tro's.
Yeah.
Couch,
So-
man. I got confirmation this time, man. I think I'm good.
You got your own room this time.
My own room. I get to sleep by myself. It's gonna be great. So Doug, welcome. Tell us about the conference, man. We're excited. I haven't had a chance to see who's all talking and all that. So give our listeners an update.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, you mentioned Rob Sivert, so he's back again, which is always exciting. We've got you and Tro both speaking as well. Dr. Ben is back. Some new people. Amber O'Hearn is gracing us with their presence, which is going to be awesome. We've got Ken Berry coming, which is going to be interesting because there's a couple of people that want to talk to him about his opinions on exercise and stuff like that. So, and especially Dr. Ben. So that's going to be interesting. Dave Diamond, Dr. David Diamond is back. He's spoken at a couple of our events, but he's the anti-statin guy mainly, and always got some really cool new research and stuff that he presents about that. Somebody that Nina Teicholz actually introduced me to is Dr. Johannes Skoll, who's coming from Germany to come and speak. Amazing guy, internal medicine doc. He's specialized in emergency medicine, specialized in nutritional medicine, specialized in sports medicine. He's qualified as in preventive medicine, which I'm not even sure I've heard of that here in the States. It's something in Europe or definitely obviously in Germany. But he's the chairman or the president of the German Academy of Preventive Medicine. So I'm really excited to meet him and see how we can work with him to expand what we're doing more into Germany. We've got contacts and stuff in a bunch of other countries, but not in Germany. So this will be hopefully a cool starting point for that. Siobhan Huggins she's a researcher that works with Dave Feldman on all his LDL stuff that he does. Philip Ovadia is a cardiothoracic surgeon who actually came to one of our Florida events a few years ago and literally got converted there. And he's just written a book like Stay Off My Operating Table, which he's literally busy promoting right now. It's just been published. And so he's actually going to do a talk. Michelle Hearn is an incredible dietitian. She spoke for the first time in San Diego. Really dynamic speaker. Sometimes you get some people that stand up there and their content's great, but sometimes their presentation's not brilliant. She's just so dynamic that like you can't help but listen. Arthur Agustin's back after the San Diego one, which I'm really excited about. He's an icon. And then Joe Niflin's been at many of our events talking about addiction, carb addiction, food addiction. Vivian Lowe, she's very involved in our outreach committee at the SMHP and talks a lot about ethnic differences that we need to take into account, as you guys, as physicians and stuff, that different ethnicities respond differently to different inputs, right? And it's something that's not really documented, so she talks about that quite a lot.
Yeah, that's critically important.
Yeah.
To be able to reach the communities that need it the most, for sure.
Right. Pete Delanoy is talking about gout, which we haven't actually ever had a talk about gout and the benefits of this lifestyle on that. So that's going to be really interesting. And then, since it's only a 3-day event, unlike San Diego, that was like a full house for us. But then I was talking with Marco Cuzella, and he really wanted to come and do something. So what we've done is we've set up I think on the Sunday at lunch, we're going to do a whole workshop teaching people like that want to now implement it, like practical practical stuff, especially about deprescribing and stuff like that, because he's been involved in writing papers with Eric Westman and a bunch of other people on that particular subject. So yeah, we kind of bursting at the seams in terms of our lineup for this event, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, if you can make it, it's amazing. I mean, we saw, when I was in San Diego, we saw Arthur Agates, and we saw all these like 4 or 5 of the giants having a discussion between sessions, and you think, wow, this is incredible, like to hear their takes on things, and just to be able to engage. A lot of them I got to sit down and talk to and see them as people, and it's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, it was a privilege to be in the room for that, and it was one of those things that we could not have scripted it better if we tried. It just evolved into this amazing discussion, yeah, but that's the kind of thing that I think that's the best thing that's ever happened at one of our events. But there's similar things like that happening all the time in the expo area, at dinner at night. The dinners, that's one of the things that's different to San Diego, is that everybody gets to come to the dinner at this event. So, and it's all included in the price of the ticket. Friday and Saturday night, the chef, we actually were working with him a couple of days ago on the menu for this, and we work really hard with them to make sure that it is really genuine, proper keto food. So that's exciting too.
I can't wait, man. I can't wait. It's going to be great, and it's nice, warm temperature. We can escape the cold. I know it's nice in San Diego all the time, but escape the Northeast cold is always going to be nice. I really look forward to Ken Berry, Arthur Agatston. All the speakers sound really interesting. And I heard there's one guy who's really going to give a great talk there.
Collision. Yeah, amazing. Hey, and also, Doug, this will be available for people who can't make it? Will be available online?
It's available. We always did used to have a live stream, but we never really promoted it. And then once we did these 2 virtual events a couple of years ago now, because of COVID, we became fully aware of how valuable it was for people that weren't able to travel. So yes, that's if you can't attend in person, then the live stream option is available, and that gives you access then on an ongoing basis to all the videos from the event after the event. And the people that attend in person also get access to all those videos as part of the deal with their ticket.
Awesome.
I can't wait.
I hear they're raffling off a picture of Tro in his spandex shirt when he's working out, but I'm not sure. I don't want to confirm that yet.
Could be. I can't wait. I'm going to enter the raffle then for sure.
And you got to have a discount code for our people.
Yeah. So I think they should know it by now. It's LowCarbMD. It's like pretty difficult to remember, right? LowCarbMD gets them 20% off their cart. So if they are ordering the CME certificate as well, then they add that to the cart, then the code takes the 20% off both things, the ticket and the CME certificate.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Hey, Doug, thanks for joining us. I'm glad we could talk about this. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be nice to see everyone again.
And nice warm Boca.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And so, and just that was what was so cool about, Brian, you were there in San Diego. Just the excitement of everybody actually seeing people again and being able to be in the same room and have discussions and talks again was so special. And I'm hoping that it's going to be the same in Boca.
Can't wait.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much.